Not really sure how to start this one off, but I'm going to try my best. There's this narrative I see a lot when it comes to the concept of chosen ones. And much like when I was talking about the concept of generational cycles, or when I think about the concept of forgiveness, I feel like there are some missing pages from like the book of forgiveness or the book of um, generational cycles and generational trauma. And so, too, I feel like there are some pages missing from the book of this concept of chosen ones because you hear this term often in various sort of um, spiritual, I guess, circles. But it's a very, to me, it has always felt like a very detached concept. Like I could never connect to the concept in the sense that I couldn't understand it. Again, much like previously with generational cycles or with forgiveness, like the way I would describe how I felt when hearing about these terms and these concepts from people um, is that it felt very disconnected. Like I couldn't connect to the concepts. The way that I could paint this visually is like if I'm on one side of like a cavern, like an abyss between me and um, someone else on the other side of this cavern or this abyss. Um, and from that, their side of this abyss, right? This person is just yelling at me, encouraging me essentially to just cross the abyss, just cross the abyss, they keep saying. And to me, I'm thinking, how am I supposed to cross over to the other side, to the abyss, when I have no rope, when I have no bridge? Um, I can't leap over, I can't fly over. How am I supposed to? Like, it felt like I wasn't getting what I needed to cross over, right? Um, and I guess some people could take this as like taking a leap of faith. But I think there's more to it. I don't think it's that simple for everyone to just take that leap of faith. I think sometimes you need a little bit more guidance. And have been one of these people where I felt like I needed something more than just someone encouraging me to cross over. I needed to almost see it in a different light. And so, again, with those previous concepts that I talked about, I had to kind of shift my lens to look at it another way in order to find or like build a bridge myself to cross over. And so today I kind of want to talk about this concept of chosen ones and look at it from a different light. In my experience so far, when I've heard the term chosen one, or, this sort of, how would I like protagonist, main character kind of concept that people sort of, I don't know if project is the right word, but I mean, essentially what happens is they call you a chosen one, or they call themselves a chosen one, or they call this person a chosen one, right? It's a title, essentially. But I think what happens when you don't give proper context and proper understanding is people just take that term and they run with it. And that can often lead to um, kind of feeding the ego. I'm not someone who believes in like ego deaths or anything, or that you should get rid of your ego. I think all parts of you are there for a reason, including your ego, including your shadow. You just have to learn to work with these things, right? But you don't want to feed your ego in the sense that you don't want to. It's a good way of describing this. The only kind of like visual that I'm getting here is that like mold can be good for certain things. Like I think we got mold from, we got penicillin from mold, but you don't want to feed mold. You don't want to encourage it in a way where it like spreads and goes everywhere. There's certain things in life where we need that thing, but just letting it run amok is like not good, right? And your ego is one of those things where it's not so much controlling it, but like teaching it when it should be doing its job, right? And sometimes when you have these titles that we've often seen in media, in books and movies, TV shows, where the chosen one, they're unique and they're special and there's no one like them and they're going to save the world. When you take that and you pull it from fiction and you try and apply it into real life, it gives people, it feeds their ego in the sense that because they see the depictions of chosen ones and heroes in media, they think that, oh, nothing can exist without me or nothing will happen without me. And I kind of want to add like a footnote here because, yes, you are unique. Yes, you are important. You are special, right? And I don't just say these things. You are, in the eyes of the universe, you are. But you have to realize that because you are these things, that you are special and you're unique, so is everybody else. And I say this because a lot of the times when people, you hear like main character syndrome or whatever, right? Or you hear people calling just people on the street NPCs and stuff. You start dehumanizing other people because you think you are the only main character, that you are the only hero. But the fact of the matter is that everyone is a main character, especially for their own story, but also, again, in the eyes of the universe. That doesn't make you any less special, as much as it doesn't make anyone else any less special, right? You have to focus more on inward, on your special talents, on your skills, on what makes you unique, as opposed to comparing yourself to other people and their specialness, right? And so I've never really vibed with this concept of the hero or the chosen one as it's sort of presented in kind of the like larger narrative that most people in like, yes, spiritual or faith-based communities. I still don't have like a complete word for like spiritual communities because I think spirituality has become its own thing, much like how religion has become its own thing. But people who are like seers or clairvoyants or oracles, they'll often use the term chosen ones, or hero, or all these things. But because we're not getting the full picture, this like mainstream, I guess, quote unquote mainstream idea that we have of chosen ones is kind of fragmented right now. So I had to take a deeper look at it and understand it from a different angle because I don't want to be someone who presents chosen one in this way where it feeds the ego. Um, because you don't want to be doing that, but also because now this new understanding, this new perspective that I have of a hero or a chosen one is a lot more. Again, it helps you build that bridge to cross over to the other side. I'm trying to find a way to sort of convey what I have felt and what I've seen and what I understand. And I think I'm just gonna start with the visual analogy that I have. But think of yourself as like a lump of clay, and there's other lumps of clay, but you're a lump of clay, and your sculptor has chosen you for a particular project. And they have a sketch for this project, and whatever like little blueprints and details that they need, everything is marked down, and they're ready, and they are starting to sort of mold you and shape you into this goal, into this desired outcome, this vision that they see, right? They're trying to mold you into this vision. And so, but you're like a sentient lump of clay. And so you can kind of, you don't fully see the picture, you don't understand it because you're a lump of clay, right? You're clay. But you can see that the sculptor is doing something. They're pressing their fingers in certain ways, they're shaping certain parts of you. And now you, as a sentient lump of clay, you can choose to kind of go along with these motions, or you can choose to sort of not. You can slump, you can um, harden a little too fast. And of course, there's other factors to this as well, right? Is the sculptor adding enough water, right? Um, is are the conditions proper enough to create the sculpture that they have in mind? um, Many other factors, right? Again, are they careful about how they're doing the sculpting, right? Is gravity going to come into play again when it comes to this like slumping and like not staying upright where you should be when the sketch calls for it? There's other factors, external factors, aside from the sculptor and the clay. But if the clay here is like a sentient lump of clay, it can choose to work with the sculptor, or it can choose to kind of rebel, right? And if the clay is too tough, or it's too wet, or it's just not the right composition for what the sculptor has in mind, they will go ahead and set this clay aside and pick out like other clay, right? So as I said in the beginning, is imagine you are this lump of clay. That is kind of how I would describe the experience of being a chosen one, is that yes, you've been chosen as this lump of clay. And if you work with the sculptor and kind of release and loosen up and allow the sculptor to sculpt you into the vision that they have, then you will become this vision. Again, there are external factors, but the sculptor has to keep that in mind, right? Again, it's if the atmosphere is too dry, they're going to need to find a way to add more moisture and humidity, right, to help the clay stay wet. But you also have a job. You're, again, a sentient piece of clay, not just a regular piece of clay. You have the choice to work with the sculptor or not, right? And you can make things easier for yourself and the sculptor, or make it more difficult. And the choice, this is where free will comes in, is like the choice is up to you. But if you can't kind of fit the vision, then they're going to have to get another piece of clay, right? And I don't want that to sound like scary or frightening or anything. What I'm instead trying to do is encourage you to like loosen up, to release, to like not fight certain things that the sculptor is trying to mold you into, right? Even if you don't fully understand the vision and you don't fully understand the sketches, release, loosen up, allow the sculptor to mold you. And in that sense, you are the chosen one, but you have to be willing to be the chosen one, right? You have been chosen, but you have to work with the sculptor. You're only a chosen one, or the hero, or the main character, or whatever, so long as you release the need to control, or to be the one in control. But if you start trying to control things, or fighting against things, then the sculptor is going to have to get more clay, right? It's not, you will, I don't know, like, I don't want to say it like that actually, but like, that's how we're all kind of the chosen ones. We all have this potential to become the vision that the sculptor has in mind, but we have to kind of work with the sculptor. We have to kind of follow beat for beat if they are carving a certain part of us, right? Getting rid of certain parts of us, we have to allow that. If they're adding certain parts, we have to allow that. If they're molding certain parts, we have to allow that. No, again, it's, we do have free will, and that's not to say, I don't want to say like be a doormat or anything, because I don't want to encourage that in any level. Because I think if I like perpetuate this idea that you have to be a doormat to the sculptor, then you may get into this habit of being a doormat to like other people as well. So I don't want to say be a doormat, but it's like let things kind of happen and don't hold on to certain things, right? Um, like have your resolve, but also when things are out of your control, that's out of your control for a reason. And it's teaching you to sort of loosen up and to release, to surrender, as they say, right? But I think my main point here is that we're all chosen ones. We just have to work with the sculptor in order to become like the final version or the vision that the sculptor has in mind. And now, this concept of the sculptor, I've talked about like us being kind of these sentient lumps of clay. So who is the sculptor, right? I don't want to get into like details of that. I don't want to push any ideas for anyone. The sculptor is whoever you believe that to be, whether it's fate, some kind of god, or whatever it is that you believe in, that is essentially the one who is, or like some kind of architect, like whoever it is that you believe has like more information or more knowledge, has higher knowledge than us as human beings. Whoever it is that you believe, like that is the sculptor. I'm someone who believes that there's a little bit of truth in everything. So, and I think faith is really important. So, whatever it is that you have faith in, whatever it is that you believe in, is who the sculpture is for you. But I do kind of emphasize that it's not really important who is what. What is important is you and what you're doing, um, in the present moment. Not so much these details, these titles that we have for things. None of these things really matter. Essentially, what matters is what is at your center, what is at your core. Are you able to move with the hands that are sculpting you? Or is there some part of you that needs to either toughen up or loosen up? Or what are you being urged to do, right, by these hands? That is how you kind of walk this path of being the chosen one, is that you have to go with the flow and move with the motions, ride the waves, whatever it may be, whatever it is that you're being called to do is what you have to do. But for this, you have to be able to feel the hands of the sculptor and sort of understand why they're pushing this way or pulling that way. And in order to do that, you have to gain some level of sensitivity. And I don't believe that sensitivity is something that you can lose permanently or something that you don't have. I think that's something you can foster within yourself. But I think a lot of people, when it comes to like vulnerability and sensitivity, they see it as a negative thing. They see it as a weakness, right? Um, it's not. But I think sometimes you're kind of raised in an environment, or you're conditioned, whether it be by your environment or by media or, societal stuff. You're taught to kind of believe that vulnerabilities are bad and being sensitive is bad. So, all kids are sensitive, right? they think of like babies, like the slightest thing will make them cry. We're all born kind of sensitive and vulnerable, but it's almost like we try and toughen up, and because we think these like sensitivities are bad, but they're not. It's what helps us feel those hands, right? And those hands and this sensitivity, like fostering the sensitivity and using it in a way, or like containing it within you in a way that's like helpful for you, and learning to work with it. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier on about like the ego and shadows, right? These parts of you that you have, sensitivity is one of these things. It's not in the same group as like the ego or the shadow, but it is a thing. It is a part of you. And I think it's something we're all born with. You learn to work with it, right? And you learn where it is like bad in the sense that like where it is like not serving you and where it's harming you, but you also learn to use it in the ways that it is serving you and that it is good for you. So I think if we sort of de I don't know if destigmatize is the right word. I feel like that's a very serious word. But if we sort of deconstruct how we see sensitivity and vulnerability, then maybe fostering this within ourselves is a good way of like staying connected to the sculptor and understanding what the sculptor is trying to do. The ability to feel, right? It goes beyond the ability to like sense things, right? But the ability to feel also goes to touch, and like the sculptor is touching you in the sense that they are molding you, right? And shaping you into becoming the vision, um, into becoming, the reason that they chose you to be the chosen one, if that makes sense. So to briefly recap, because I felt like I went off on just like all over the place, anyone can be the chosen one because we all have potential to become the vision of the sculptor. But we have to release and we have to work with the sculptor in order to become this vision, right? Because the second that we become too tough and not as easy to work with, it, the vision will have to go to another piece of clay. So, how do we stay connected to the sculptor and understanding of what the sculptor is trying to do? Well, we do that through sensitivity, right? Comparing it to like sensitivity of the skin, you have to understand why the sculptor is pushing in certain ways or pressing in certain ways. That's how we communicate. Again, a sentient lump of clay doesn't have a voice, can't speak or hear or anything. The only thing they could possibly have is like a sense of touch where the hand of the sculptor meets the clay, right? The clay body. So your vulnerabilities and sensitivities are actually important when you're sensitive, when you are vulnerable, when you feel vulnerable. That's when you're kind of making contact with that hand of the sculptor. And that is how you continue to sort of um, receive the instructions, I guess, from the sculptor in how you should be shaped to be to kind of maintain and continue on this path of the being the chosen one, becoming the vision of the sculptor. Just as a footnote, as I was kind of thinking about this after I recorded, I don't want to like scare anyone, because sometimes we do get these anxieties, right? Thinking like, oh, I'm gonna lose like my status of chosen one. It's not a status, right? So don't think of it as a status or some sort of hierarchy, because when you start thinking of it as a status or a hierarchy, again, that feeds the ego. It's not really something you can lose so long as you, again, just let things happen, release things that are out of your control. And I think personally, when I hear things like that, or when I've heard things like that in the past, again, that has scared me, is that to release things. It almost sounded like orders, like I had to do certain things, specific things, in order to have my desired outcome, right? They felt like instructions, and I felt like I had to make like a mental checklist. But it's not like that. It's not that convoluted. Really, the only thing that you should have on your checklist is to remember to just loosen up and just go with the flow. That's such an important concept in so many different belief systems, right? Um, Not just like spiritual or faith-based things, but just like even for your like mental health, like advocates will tell you to like go with the flow, release the need for like control and stuff because it's so prevalent and it's so important. Um, and if you have this desire to, quote unquote, walk the path of the chosen one or whatever, or to be aligned with your higher self, all these like things that we hear. I don't want to call them buzzwords because that has like a negative connotation, but I would say like a very generalized term, like the mainstream terms that you kind of hear. If you want to kind of walk these, the path, the aligned path or whatever, um, then it'll come to you naturally, right? Because you have this desire to stay aligned, to be this chosen one, to be the hero, because you want to help. it it'll come to you naturally, like to learning how to surrender, learning how to loosen up, so that you can again, or learning how to become sensitive again or be sensitive if you thought that you've never been sensitive. um, like if you personally thought you've never been sensitive, you will learn how to be sensitive again, or you will learn whatever it is that you need, you will learn. um, Again, the first step is they're going to probably teach you how to surrender and to sort of release control and go with the flow. But once you have these base kind of foundations, um, you will learn what you need to know in order to stay on this path because this is what you desire, right? The clay is just as important as the sculptor. So don't worry, there's nothing to get anxious about or worried about. There's nothing to lose here because as long as you desire something strongly and you want it to make it happen, you're already aligned with the sculptor. If you show that potential, if you show that promise, that probability, because when you have that strong desire, you're showing that you have the probability, the promise to become the vision. Then the sculptor will do everything they can because it's like, oh, I found the one, that I think I can turn into the sketch that I've made. So they will do what needs to be done. They will take care of the outside external conditions. You just have to kind of go with the flow.